Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. So first of all, we'll read from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 6, Uniting Two Worlds, Chant Hare Krishna and Fight. The same man then referred to Prabhupada's purport, which Bhavananda Goswami had read, in which Prabhupada had criticised the life of the hog-like man who lives only for sense gratification. One of your principal statements, the man said, was that a man goes on the motor tram, stands there for 2 hours, reaches his place of business and works there from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, returns back, has his food and sex and all that. I have found many people who have worked very hard, raised children very nicely, have sex, lead a good life. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yes, if there is no wrong, said Prabhupada, it is all right, but this sort of life is not very palatable. The man continued, because I find even the dog. Srila Prabhupada interrupted, but his reply was soft and humble. If you like that life, if you feel it is good, then that is up to you. But I don't think this is a very nice way of life, to work so hard simply for bread. No, the man said, I agree there. Srila Prabhupada then raised his voice more strongly. Then agreed. Then why disagree? That's all right, no more. The man had more questions, but Tamal Krishna called on someone else. Would you agree that God is just a concept? If you do not, please give a logical reason for that. Prabhupada, why shall I agree that God is only a concept? Because I want it logically. You do not know logic, you have to learn logic. But I still would like you to explain it logically. Yes, but you have to learn how to know it. There is master, just like you cannot prove logically that without father there is a child. Srila Prabhupada explained that everything we see is growing out of the earth, and the earth is described in the Vedas as the mother. But there cannot be a child without a father. When there is a mother and child, there must be a father. God, therefore, is the father of everything. Srila Prabhupada's disciples were urging him not to exert himself, so when Swarup Damodar arrived, Srila Prabhupada asked him to give the evening lecture. Prabhupada was very impressed with Swarup Damodar's scientific presentation of Krishna consciousness. One of the devotees remarked that Swarup Damodar's talk seemed too technical for the audience, but another devotee replied that even if no one else had appreciated the speech, Srila Prabhupada had, and so it was a success. Following Swarup Damodar's lecture, Srila Prabhupada spoke for about 5 minutes and left without taking any questions. The following night, Prabhupada did not speak at all, but he sat on stage while two of India's leading cardiologists, Dr. Kesha Rao Dati and Dr. Sharma, spoke. Srila Prabhupada had been garlanded by Dr. Dati and sat patiently and silently on Vyasasan, satisfied that prominent Bombayites were honouring the Krishna conscious movement. Dr. Dati spoke about heart disease and said it could be eliminated by controlling anxiety. He then praised Srila Prabhupada and his movement. After the doctor's brief talks, Swarup Damodar gave another scientific lecture and showed slides. Srila Prabhupada later told Swarup Damodar and others, "This scientific program has given me extra strength to preach Krishna consciousness. It seems like you're giving more stress to science in recent years than previously," said Tamal Krishna Goswami. "That is required for convincing the modernized man," said Prabhupada. "Perhaps I'm the first man who protested against these unauthorized scientists." "Oh yes," said Swarup Damodar, "everybody's afraid of them except Srila Prabhupada. Frankly speaking, I never knew that the problem was this serious before I met Srila Prabhupada. I never thought about this. Therefore I took it so seriously," said Prabhupada. "Every morning walk I would look for you and ask, where is the scientist?" Meaning, where's Swarup Damodar? His disciple at that time was called Dr. Singh. And there's a nice book called Life Comes from Life you can read, where Dr. Singh, who is a very educated scientist who became a devotee, he didn't give up science, but then he engages his learning of science in Krishna consciousness. And that book, Life Comes from Life, is very good. It deals very logically and with common sense the anomalies of the and the faults of the misdirected scientists. So of course that doesn't mean to say that every scientist is wrong, because Krishna is a supreme scientist, and when these scientists discover something, they're actually discovering something which Krishna set up already. So it's not that it's like Newton's law. It's not his law. He never created it. He just discovered it. So people they're anxious to get grants so they can get a name for themselves in certain kind of scientific and academical circles. Circuses, maybe that was a Freudian slip. And of course, we take advantage of the things that the scientists create, and we use it in Krishna's service. And as we say, there's nothing wrong with science. Science means truth, to find the truth, but people who are guising the name of truth and not being open to all the evidence which is there, and therefore they're not really looking for the truth. They have a motivation. So that's what Prabhupada's at. Because Prabhupada himself, he was a scientist. He was studying. He was a pharmacologist, right? So that's not without science. But it's the proper use of things. That's what Prabhupada's getting at here, and the cheating propensity which is there in people. That's what's his main concern. So here I have an opportunity to impress a scientist, and that will fructify. That was my aim. Therefore I was bothering you in so many ways. This is Prabhupada speaking there. "It is your incredible mercy," Prabhupada said, "Swarup Damodar, because I cannot use the technical words," Prabhupada said, "and he can do that, so I wanted that he should be trained up. So therefore the Bhaktivedanta Institute was formed with Swarup Damodar Goswami and Sadhaputta and many other devotees who are from very highly educated, scientific, academic, mathematic background. They were PhDs. They're not just some little upstarts. And if you ask Mariana, she knows how much work goes into a PhD. You've done so much work already from the age of 5 at school all the way through, and you can stop at any time and get a decent job, but you're taking it further and further, and it's not everybody that goes to that extent. So these devotees had credibility. So I recommend reading this book, Life Comes from Life. Now Prabhupada, he deals with the doubts and anomalies of the scientific theories in a common sense way, but he was saying there that he wanted Swarup Damodar to deal with it in the language which they speak, because sometimes people are bewildered by scientists' language because they don't understand it. They just and if something doesn't fit their theory, they just give it a term like punctuated equilibrium. Does anybody know what punctuated equilibrium means? No, because you're all just commoners, so I'm a scientist, so just listen to what I've got to say, because I made up a big word that nobody knows. So therefore I must be more intelligent because I know words that you don't know. But what is it, Javit?
It's a theory of evolution which tries to explain the areas of Darwin's theory, which doesn't Darwin's theory doesn't explain how there were sudden changes in the species according to the fossil record. The fossil record doesn't seem to describe a slow evolution of the species. So they came up with this theory that there's like a slow evolution, and then all of a sudden there's like
jumps.
Yeah, massive change.
Yeah, and basically that came around because there was pressure on them to provide the missing link. They came up with the theory that there's various links, and then they were always looking for the missing link. When they can't find it, then they just, rather than saying, oh well, this theory doesn't seem to be correct, there must be another reason, to say, okay, let's just make up a term, we'll call it punctuated equilibrium, that there is no missing link, because we can't find it, there isn't there, so it just jumps from this to that. So they just, this shows that they're not really looking for the truth, because truth means you find the evidence and then the evidence speaks for itself, not that you come up with a thing and then you try to make it fit into it, and if it doesn't fit you just make up terms to say why it doesn't fit, but it's still the same thing. So therefore they're cheating in that regard. So this is what Prabhupada was concerned about, that these people are getting so much credibility and they're cheating people out of thinking that there is some spiritual aspect to life, that life just comes from matter. But in that wonderful book, Life Comes from Life, it's a transcription of discussions, morning walks with Srila Prabhupada and this Dr. Singh, who's Swarup Damodar, and it's very enlivening. Oh yeah, so this is Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 13. How we're going to converses with Jad Bharat, text 10. Actually, when you said it was text 10, I looked in the wrong chapter. So I'd made some notes on another verse, but I'll just... Krishna consciousness is all interconnected, so it'll probably fit anyway. Karhi Sma Chit Chudra Rasan Vichinvams Karhi Sma Chit Chudra Rasan Vichinvams Tanmakshi Kabir Vyatito Vimana Tanmakshi Kabir Vyatito Vimana Tatrati Krichrat Pratilab Damano Tatrati Krichrat Tatrati Krichrat Pratilab Damano Balad Vilimpanti Ata Tam Tato Ye Balad Vilimpantyata Tam Tato Ye Karhi Smachit Kshudra Rasan Vichinvam Tanmakshi Kabir Vyatito Vimana Tatrati krishra tat pratilabdamano Balad vilumpantya tatam tatonye Kahismachit kshudra rasan vichimvams Tanmakshikabir vyatito vimana Tatrati krishra pratilabdamano Balad vilumpantya tatam tatonye Please chant. Ladies. Karhismachit, sometimes Kshudra, very insignificant, Rasan, sexual enjoyment, Vichinvan, searching for, Tat, of those women, Makshi, Kabi, by honeybees or the husbands or family members, Vyatita, very much aggrieved, Vimana, insulted, Tatra, in that, Ati, very much, Krichrat, with difficulty because of spending money, Pratilabdhamana, obtaining sexual enjoyment, Balat, by force, Vilumpanti, kidnapped, Ata, forbidden, thereafter. Tam, the object of sense enjoyment, the woman, Tata, from him, Anye, another debauchee. Translation. Sometimes in order to have a little insignificant sex enjoyment, one searches after debauched women. In this attempt, one is insulted and chastised by the woman's kinsmen. This is like going to take honey from a beehive and being attacked by the bees. Sometimes after spending lots of money, one may acquire another woman for extra sense enjoyment. Unfortunately, the object of sense enjoyment, the woman, is taken away or kidnapped by another debauchee. Please repeat. Sometimes, in order to have a little insignificant sex enjoyment, one searches after debauched women. In this attempt, one is insulted and chastised by the woman's kinsman. This is like going to take honey from a beehive and being attacked by the bees. Sometimes after spending lots of money, one may acquire another woman for some extra sense enjoyment. Unfortunately, the object of sense enjoyment, the woman, is taken away or kidnapped by another debauchee. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In a great forest, honeycombs are very important. People often go there to collect honey from the combs, and sometimes the bees attack and punish them. In the human society, those who are not Krishna conscious remain in the forest of material life simply for the honey of sex life. Such debauchees are not at all satisfied with one wife. They want many women. Day after day, with great difficulty, they try to secure such women, and sometimes, while trying to taste this kind of honey, one is attacked by a woman's kinsman and chastised very heavily. By bribing others, one may secure another woman for sense enjoyment, or for enjoyment, Yet another debauchee may kidnap her or offer her something better. This women hunting is going on in the force of material world, sometimes legally and sometimes illegally. Consequently, in this Krishna conscious movement, the devotees are forbidden to have illicit sex. Thus they avoid so many difficulties. One should remain satisfied with one woman, being duly married. One can satisfy one's lusty desires with his wife without creating disturbances in society and being punished for doing so. Om Gyanatimarandasya Gyanjana Salakaya Chakshurmatam Yana Tasma Shri Guruve Namaha Bhakam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Girim Yatkipatam Hambande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. It's not so much the case here in the UK, but in India, sometimes you'll see someone at the side of the road selling honey, and basically what they've done is they've went to some wild forest to collect honey, and they're practically risking their life. I've seen some video about that. They're risking their life to go and collect these bees, and sometimes they don't all come back to collect the honey because the hives are wild. They're not like some kind of controlled thing where they wear bee suits and all the rest of it. These guys are like climbing up a tree and poking it with a stick and putting themselves at risk to get a bit of honey, because this is when people are poor, then things become a bit desperate. People do so many things. Either they become desperate or they become really ingenious. There's one old lady in Nepal, she was selling loads of dried leaves which she just picked up, and basically she was taking them and stuffing them into pillowcases and making cushions with them. So she was making a living of something like that. And of course, in this country we have a social security system, and it's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when we depend too much, not that we shouldn't depend at all, but when we depend too much on another's mercy, it saps the very vitality of life. So therefore we become intellectually lazy, and then other people come into the country and take the jobs, and we'll be complaining, oh, why these foreigners come to take all our jobs? You want this job? No, I'll just sign on the dole instead. But so we become lazy, through hardships. Then becomes a lot of development of infrastructure, etc., jobs, etc. And then when people get more opulent, more affluent, then they become lazy. They just want to enjoy, and because of this enjoyment, so just like here, someone may In this instance, some man may attain a woman, or it may happen that a woman attains a man, and then they become complacent, and then they may lose that person, or someone else will come along and take it. Either they'll drive a bigger car, or they'll make a better offer, or else they'll give the person more attention, and so taking each other for granted is something which is not, even in material life, it's not going to make a stable situation. I remember Harry Case only given a class on this in the manor many years ago, and he was talking about how when lust develops, then we become so controlled by that we become blind to the dangers of it. So just like there's that old nursery rhyme, Georgie Porgy pudding and pie, kissed the girls and made them cry. When the boys came out to play, Georgie Porgy ran away. Anyone remember that one? I was George when I was younger, so they used to tease me with that nursery rhyme. So don't anyone try it. But later on you find out that there's actually a more adult understanding. And a lot of these nursery rhymes have got some kind of sinister or some more serious thing which kids are singing but they don't know what it's about. So basically, some guy gets involved in some extracurricular activities and gets some other girl in trouble, and then the family relatives find out about it and they come out to play. They're going to beat him up or kill him or cause some difficulty. And this is what's being talked about here. Is Georgie Porgy's been a bad boy, and the family members are going to hunt him down. So let's mention the Bhagavad Gita, the destroyers of family tradition dwell always in hell. So we have to, according to the Vedic situation, in order for children to grow up stable, then it's better that they have a mother and a father figure there. And this is often disturbed because one's senses go elsewhere, or else someone interferes with that stable family situation. So of course, in the Vedic situation, it's not that one has to divorce even if, regarding separation, if two people are bickering all the time, or there are certain circumstances when couples can separate, but here we're talking about the general thing is that one should be satisfied in their own position. And sometimes people become, as we were saying, a little bit more affluent, so they think, I've got a bit extra spending money, and then their senses become attracted. They see somebody or something, and perhaps it's either by illicit or illicit means, they try to obtain another woman. So sometimes people are consensual to this, either through prostitution or through just maybe having some affair or something like that. But other times there's so much kidnapping going on, even in the modern times. There's unbelievable amount of girls go missing all over the world, not just in less developed countries, but people go missing off the streets. And there's serious human trafficking going on. People are promised, like for example in some countries, they promise young girls a modelling job, or they promise them some other kind of job, and they get them into the country, but when they get there, they're forced to stay in rooms with many other people, and they've got no freedom. The person's got their passports, they know where they live, and they threaten them. This is like a horrible, demoniac exploitation of human beings. And such people should be tracked down, and they should be just given capital punishment. That is the opinion of the Shastra, that these kind of persons, if you allow them to stay alive, then what they're going to do, they're just going to do the same thing again. There's no cure for that kind of thing. They have no respect for anyone's life, and actually this is... Some people are actually so poor that they even sell their own children. Actually, not so poor, because even if you're poor, you don't necessarily sell children, but they're so poor morally that they would consider money more important than protecting their young daughter. So this is a Krishna conscious movement. Sometimes it may seem that there's some inequality, but the protection of women is a very important thing. This is what the Bhagavad Gita was about. It was about protecting the honour of Draupadi. This is one of the main things. There was already some faction going on, but then when Draupadi, they attempted to derobe Draupadi, then the Pandavas decided, okay, there's no more opportunity for diplomatic relations. This is showing that they have no respect whatsoever to do that to a chaste lady, respectable lady, to try to do that in public. Of course, Krishna saved her. So this is all about not controlling the senses. It creates so much complications in life that simply one can be content in their life, and this means that we find an engagement for the senses which is higher than simply engaging with the sense objects. So there has to be some kind of sense gratification in their life, just like with food. If the cook doesn't put enough salt in it, then everybody thinks, oh, it's not salty enough, it's not palatable, so you add some more salt in. And if there's no salt there, then you might not eat as much. And then if there's too much salt in it, then you definitely won't eat much, and then you can't take the salt out. So sometimes the cooks, if they space out, they salt it twice. Anybody ever done that? Yeah, sometimes that happens, isn't it? And sometimes it's even worse, they mistake sugar for salt. One time at Bhaktivedanta Manor, they had a huge big pot of milk. I used to go out preaching with the Indian congregation, and I wouldn't come back till late at night, and usually there was not much prasadam left. And one time I came back and there was loads of milk left, and I thought, oh, that's great. And then I took a cup, and then I realised that's why it was so much left. Somebody put salt in it. Because I was thinking, oh, this is a new programme, they're leaving it for us devotees who are coming back late, that's nice. And then the next night, there was pot of milk was there, and I said, oh, well, yeah, it is a new programme, that's good. Same thing again, salting it twice. And so the devotee had mistaken the salt for the sugar because somebody put it in the wrong container. So something like that you should learn first time round. But if you put salt in the wrong thing, or you put too much salt in, then it's unpalatable, not enough salt. They say in Vedic hospitality, they say if you want to get rid of an unwanted guest, you just don't put salt in the food. Because nobody will stay long. If you just don't put salt in the food, it's unpalatable. So if you invite somebody and they've overstayed their welcome, then just start hiding the salt. So this is kind of humorous thing, of course. But although in the Vedic society the guest is to be accepted as God, as if we're a guest we shouldn't say, well, you accept me as God, so just I'll decide to stay here and just squat in here at your expense, get out and work and get me a colour TV for my room and a new pair of slippers, then that's abusing the situation. So there's the Vedic rules for being a host and for being a guest. The host would try to offer something, even if one is poor, they will offer at least a place to sit, even if it's like a straw mat and a glass of water, we can at least offer that. It's interesting because that hospitality is there naturally in the world, so the Vedic thing is not just something conjured up that came out of India and let's see if it fits in the rest of the world, but actually it's natural. Veda means knowledge, so this is like a natural knowledge. When Javit and I were doing Every Town and Village, back in 88, and we went to the Western Isles, remember? That was an interesting adventure. It was like going back into the 17th century or something. I was thinking we might get burnt at the stake here. At that time, people weren't so open to foreigners, these heathens. Anyway, many of them were very friendly actually. So there was quite a polarity between some people were quite hostile and some people were very accommodating. And I got invited into this house, this lady and her daughter invited me in. And the first thing they did is have a seat, would you like a cup of tea, no, we don't drink tea, thanks, or can you get you a drink of orange juice or a glass of water? I was thinking, this is natural Vedic hospitality. And then, interestingly enough, the woman sent her daughter upstairs to can you go and get that book? And then I thought, what book? Or maybe they're going to Bible thump me here. And I come back down with SSR, Science of Self-Realization. They said, I think this might be one of your books. It was here in the house when we came into here, when we moved in. And she says, I says, oh, you just keep it and read it. She says, no, we've got our own religion, but we'd like to give it to somebody else. So the next day I sold it to some hotel owner. But that Vedic hospitality is natural everywhere. And you go all over the world, like Javat Vrinda and myself were in Mexico a few years ago, and hospitality was there also. It was a friend, Alan, and his wife, what's her name again? Haridata. We were guests in their house for a month, and there was ourselves and Dan and some other friends from Glasgow University where Alan was doing his PhD. And although they're there, some were there for a few weeks, some were there for a full month, they never once complained about anything. Of course we tried to behave ourselves when we were there, but having your best friend in your house for a month, is probably not an easy thing. So that hospitality is natural. So these principles are natural because everybody's the same, everyone's got the same needs, we've all got the same senses, we've all got the same challenges. So it's not like Krishna consciousness applies to Hindus, but it doesn't apply to Catholics or Protestants or Muslims or atheists. It applies to everybody. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains about being in the mode of goodness. One of the austerities is to be satisfied. And we think, well, why would that be an austerity? It sounds like it should be a good thing, to be satisfied. So can anyone explain what that would mean as an austerity mode of goodness, to be satisfied? Exactly, yeah. Anyone else like to add to that?
There's another verse in the Bhagavad Gita that says, one who is satisfied by that which comes with its own accord. That's elevated. In that section of the Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna is describing devotees on quite an elevated platform to be satisfied with what comes without making any extraneous endeavour.
That's right. It's an austerity because sometimes then you have to control your mind. The mind might come up and say, oh, here's an idea to expand your sense enjoyment. So extended selfishness is manifest in forms of society, friendship and love, nationality, things like that. And we think, well, why is that selfish? Someone may be a great philanthropist. That's not very selfish, that's giving so much away. So how could that be selfish? I'm not saying that it's always like that, but how could it be? If someone's doing charity, or they're doing something for the community, doing something just beyond their own little family circle, or doing something within the family, why would that be considered extended selfishness, Vrinda? Sorry.
He may hate something, not the man. They have the duality, the opposites, just for another.
It's true, yeah. So some people are prepared to die for their country against other people who are prepared to die for their country. But what's the real difference? The law that says why anybody has to die for their country, which is just some imagined border. Someone say this is this country and that is that country. And because they draw a line and they put a sentry there with some guns, then people take it seriously when they start shooting. I remember 20 years ago seeing this old Western movie, and back in the days of the gold rush, which would be what, the early 19th century or something. So people were going to certain places, particularly California, and they would go digging or panning for gold. Either they'd try mining or they'd try panning in the rivers, in the hills. And then someone would find a big nugget and then they would stake their claim, which would mean they would put a bit of like a plank of wood in it with a name on it, and then you'd go into town and you'd say, okay, this is my area here, I'm going to do it. But sometimes before you'd go into town, someone would be watching them, they'd shoot them dead, take their stake out those and put their name in it, instead of like, Jimmy Jones's gold claim would be like Bobby Smith instead. So this is typical what people are doing, it's just they're calling something else. Before they came along, it was nobody's, didn't belong to Mr. Jones or Mr. Smith. It's just there. But somebody puts their value on it, and that value means I can get so many things, I can get so much from my senses, I can live a life of opulence, I don't have to work hard, I work hard for a little bit, and then I can buy a saloon, and then I can just live off of that. So of course this is the hard struggle for material existence, which drives people sometimes to do things which in their right mind they wouldn't do. So due to greed, people are motivated to do things which are going to bring a bad reaction. And this false sense of proprietorship is really what's the cause of all this difficulty in the world, which is mentioned at the very beginning of Isha, to accept that which is necessary for itself, and not accept other things knowing not to whom they belong. So just like we were talking about the other day in the back of the program, is that there's this kind of hippie saying, what's yours is mine, what's mine is mine. Or what's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. That was the original thing, but in practice it's not always like that. When people are happy to avail themselves of your property, but when it comes to sharing theirs, then they're not so happy. So the only one who can really see that nothing belongs to any of us is the one who sees who it really belongs to. So just like there's a wallet lying on the street and there's nobody around, so you could say, well, there's nobody here, it doesn't belong to anybody, and you can just walk past it. And that was voidism. It doesn't belong to anybody, just leave it, don't touch it. And then you've got maybe 2 or 3 friends walking down the street and they see the wallet, and one of them pick it up and they say, oh, let's share, there's £100 in there, let's share it amongst us. And someone says, well, let's share it equally, so that would be communism. And someone says, well, I picked it up, I found it, I get 50 and you can get 25 each, you do, and that's capitalism. Or I get all of it and you get nothing. And then they say, well, we will report that you found somebody's wallet, okay, I'll give you something to shut it up, here's a tenner. So, and then those guys, or else someone comes along, picks it up and sees that there's some identification in it, and he takes it to the police station and says, this wallet's been lost here. He doesn't think, someone may come and look for it. Could be somebody who really needs it, maybe their last £100 or something that they really need to pay a bill before they get evicted, who knows what it is. So they return it to its rightful owner and see that it doesn't belong to them. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that one in knowledge sees pebbles, sand and gold as the same. Just like we're walking down the beach, maybe pebbles, maybe don't stop and think, wow, I'm so rich, there's loads of pebbles
Here, let's fill my pockets. We don't place any value on that. So one in knowledge sees others' property as no value. They don't think, I wish I could get that. I wonder if I could trick them out of it. And this is what happens with people as well. Sometimes people interfere with others' relationships and trick them out of it. One time when I was a teenager, I had a girlfriend, and there was this other guy who fancied her. And we used to hang out together, but I didn't realise he was actually a bit of a rogue. And he was older than me, so he used to get a bit more kind of, people used to look up to him a bit. But then one time he said, oh, such and such, he doesn't want to see you any longer. I said, I'll go and see her, and he says, no, she says she doesn't even want to see it. And there was nothing, actually, she should have. I said, oh, I wonder what's that about, she never said it. And then later on I found out that he'd went and told her the same thing, that I don't want to see her any longer. And then within a few days he was with her. So he was just playing a game. And I thought, at that time I thought, well, it's not meant to be, so I'm not going to create a fuss over it. Plus he's older and bigger than me. But you see how people are cheating. They tell lies to get something, they trick. This is what people are doing. They'll trick people out of their hard-earned money. And they'll trick people out of their land. And they'll trick people out of their relationships. So this lust, anger and greed creates so much problems. And it's all based on misconception of who we are. That we're thinking, I'm this body, I am this nationality, I am of this society. And so whatever body we've got, we identify with that. We identify as a male or a female in this life. And previous life may have identified as another human or animal or whatever. And we're thinking that's who we are. But actually we're none of these bodies. And we are a pure spirit soul, and our identification is actually above and beyond this temporary designation. So the real knowledge is to not become caught up with the temporary designation of the body, but to aspire for knowledge which is relating to our eternal self. And the more we cultivate that eternal self, the more we'll see who we really are. And then when we see who we really are, we can see what is that eternal relationship which we've been hankering for. We've been trying to find that perfect relationship in the material world. And we may find certain compatibilities there. Just like in Vedic marriage circumstances, they often recommend that people should get an astrological chart done in order to see there should be like certain minimal amounts of compatibility. So that would indicate that there's incompatibility, otherwise we wouldn't have to get a chart done, right? But if the people have got the same purpose in life, then that is compatible. Even if the astrological chart says, oh, there's not much compatibility there. But then Krishna consciousness transcends so much material things, including that, because when you take shelter in Krishna and when your purpose is to serve Krishna, then we transcend things like Vastu, which is the science of directions, etc. We transcend destiny. We can transcend astrology. And so there's a nice example in that respect. There was 2 disciples of Srila Prabhupada who were in India. We've mentioned this many times before, but it's still quite amazing. And prior to being devotees, they were gangsters, and like serious gangsters. But they became very sincere devotees. They became sannyasis, and they met one astrologer, and they got their palms read and their charts done. And the astrologer says, actually, according to your palm and your forehead, etc., the various things, said you should both be dead by now. And they say but there's something in your chart here which is saying that there's an element here which is actually preventing this from happening. And then they said, yeah, it's our spiritual master. And then they showed him a picture of Prabhupada, and he says, never leave the shelter of this person, otherwise it will come back to you. So this is the nature of Krishna consciousness. That we have another interesting example, actually. There was one devotee who also had got himself in trouble with the law, and he came to his senses, and he realised, he met devotees and realised he wanted to lead the life of a devotee and leave all his troubles behind. But there was something stopping it. He owed about £40,000 in fines because of some damage he did to some hotel or something like that. And he'd been paying that fine up for some time, and he was due to pay it up for a long time because he wasn't a high earner. So he said, we'll just go and find out how much that fine is. So we went to find out and said, oh, we don't have any record of that fine. So that Krishna just removed that, and then he could come and join. So of course, if we're sincere, then Krishna will remove any obstacles. Sometimes the obstacles are there because we have to learn something, and sometimes Krishna will remove obstacles so that we can come to him. And sometimes those obstacles also become lessons learned which strengthen us, and which also we can share with others when we see them overcoming the same obstacles. If Krishna just says, okay, I'll just make everything easy for you because you want to be my devotee, you've said that quite casually, so then okay, that's fine. Anybody who just says, I want to be your devotee, I'll just remove all their conditioning immediately and you're completely pure and whatever, then we wouldn't really be able to explain how to overcome the challenges, and we wouldn't be able to exercise our free will to take shelter in Krishna despite the onslaught of material elements. So Krishna is particularly kind to the devotees who are trying to be devotees in the material world, because he knows how difficult it is. Some days are not too bad, right? And some days it just seems like it's insurmountable. Because the mind, as Arjuna says, seems to be more powerful than controlling the wind. Anybody here been able to control the wind? I don't mean digestively speaking. You can't go out. You might be able to go and build a big fence to stop the wind coming into Krunabavan, but I can assure you that the wind will blow that fence down, because we've had up to 100-mile-an-hour winds here at times. We've had the roofs taken off of buildings and walls blown down and things. But we, who can control the wind? Even sometimes nowadays scientists are trying to control the elements, but they don't realise what they may be, what further complications they may create by doing that. And Arjuna said it's even more difficult to control the mind, and it is, because the mind is even a more subtle element. We've got earth, fire, water, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. So it's easier to control the earth, the grosser elements, than it is to control water. You know, you try to stop a leak in a roof, everyone ever tried to do that? You might think, oh, the leak's coming through there. Just like in the temple, we can see there's some stain there. So well, let's try and fix that part of the roof, but it could be up there and running all the way down here. So water will find its way. It's not so easy to control water. It's more difficult to control fire. Sometimes no matter how much water you've got, you can't put a fire out. You get a forest fire, it's so big. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, and mind. So the mind is even more subtle. You can't see the mind, so how can we even control it? But there is a way to do it, Maha Mantra, through chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The great deliverer of the mind. And this is recommended in the Brihadaranyaka Prana, in the age of Kali, that the most certain means of self-realization, which means that begins with controlling the senses and mind, is the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Now we could do other things as well, but it won't happen as quick and it won't come as easy. So by engaging the Hrishikesha, Hrishikena, Sevanam back to Ruchite, by engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses, Rishikesh, then our senses become controlled. So when we're talking about, for example, earlier was saying about too much salt or not enough salt, so the salt has to be regulated. You know, if Ian's cooking for Food for Scotland and he's cooking a pot that size, he knows how much salt he's got to put in. He's regulating it. And sometimes he might forget and think, have I salted it? But then you're always better to offer it and then add salt. You can't take it out. So it's regulated. So sense gratification is also regulated, so that, because the thing is not to deny the senses. Just like if the eye is diseased, we don't think, okay, eye is diseased, pluck it out, solve the problem, just get rid of it. So the senses may be causing this problem, the mind may be causing a problem, and we can't just get rid of the senses. We have them. We're sentient beings, and eternally sentient beings. So we have to, with a diseased eye, then we have to cure it by a certain process of some medical engagement through medicine or whatever else, maybe the process for curing that. So similar way in a disease condition as in material disease means that we're thinking with the body, we're thinking with the mind, we're misidentifying ourselves to be something other than it's not, which is called Maya. And there's a way to get free from that material disease, which is to engage the senses in the service of Krishna. In this way, our senses become purified and the mind becomes purified. So the mind becomes purified by chanting, and it also, the mind becomes, because we're not so advanced, we're reading this morning, Haridas Thakur could sit and chant all day long, and he was pure enough to do that, but we're not so pure, we're a bit more passionate, so we have to engage our senses, we have to do something physical, something active. If we just sit down to meditate all day, we end up meditating on the wrong things. In fact, sometimes people say, oh, I'd like to learn to meditate. You're already doing it. Everybody's meditating. I'm meditating on a new car. I'm meditating on my promotion. But they think they're just thinking about it. It's what are they meditating on? Meditating on my holidays. I've been working for the last 6 months. But if we find something to meditate on, which is actually going to satisfy us day in, day out, which will reduce our hankering for the material things which are just transient, come and go, that is a satisfaction that we can achieve through Krishna consciousness. And the more people who take to that and practice it in their life, then the more the world will become peaceful. Because it applies to everybody. And Prabhupada says you don't even have to change your religion, but you can still take to this process. But if you take to the process, you will realise that there's no difference anyway. You're just finding more about who that Supreme Person is. And so we'll just stop there. Anyone have any questions or comments?
I thought it would be nice to share an experience I had. Maybe 9 months or so before actually arriving, I got in touch and asked about coming and things. They were going, it wasn't the right time. So there was this really strong desire. I'd been there for a while to live in the temple. I just felt like, okay, not yet. And I had debt at that point, and then lockdown was coming, and I wasn't able to go out and work, and everything was changing. And it's just a really beautiful example of how, like you were saying, Krishna arranges things, because then I was being supported by the government all of a sudden. I was able to pay off all of my debt, and having a space, not going to work, meant that one of my housemates, Drew and myself, put a timetable in place. So we had like a program from when we got up to when we went to bed, just like listening to 3 Prabhupada classes a day, chanting some certain amount of japa, prasad. So it was almost like a build-up to temple life. And I could never imagine being in that situation, which is like a preparation, and then when the time was right, without any debt, without any like anchor, I was able to just come and just like fully be here. It's just
so saying about Gita that for the unsuccessful yogi, then Suchinam Shunatam would be born
Family either of Brahmins or wealthy people. So wealthy doesn't necessarily mean to say, we always think wealthy means more wealthy than what we are just now, but it means that we're not wanting for anything really, we're not having to go and rake the bins to feed ourselves or whatever. So for an unsuccessful yogi, and he says in the next life, they'll be attracted to principles of Krishna consciousness automatically without even endeavouring, without seeking for them. You will automatically be attracted. So it's often the case is that we're continuing from a previous life, or we get some mercy of Krishna, that Krishna sees that we're ready to inquire how to get out of this material world, and he starts making arrangements, he starts clearing the path. And there's some wonderful arrangements like that. There was one devotee, I think it was in France, it was either France or it was England, can't remember, but I lived in Chaitanya College at the time, and I heard about the story of this devotee who was a bit fried in life, and he decided he was going to go fishing in the canal, and he cast his rod and he pulled something up, and it turned out it was a Srimad Bhagavatam wrapped in plastic. So then he read it and he joined the temple, became a devotee. And there was another one. There's another one who was also just totally exhausted with material life, decided, what's the point of living? And he was living by the seaside. He said, I'm just going to walk off the cliff. So he was just walking along the top. He was ready to kind of walk off, and he felt something hit his leg. Looked down, it was a torn page of a Back to Godhead magazine. He sat down, read it, and then just turned around and went and joined the temple. And he's still a devotee. So Krishna protects his devotees. Sometimes we forget that. If we're going through difficulty, we think, oh, where's Krishna in this? But Krishna, sometimes like Kadamba Maharaj says that sometimes we don't see Krishna's face, but we can see the hand of Krishna. And often we only see the hand of Krishna afterwards. We realise I would never have voluntarily made that arrangement myself. I'd never went through that difficulty myself, but I'm glad I did, because now I'm here, now I'm better situated. And Mahatma Prabhu was saying that same thing. You know, if you look at the difficulties that you went through and the lessons that you learned, would you rather have not went through the difficulty and not got the lesson? Of course, there's some things we went through which were difficult that maybe we still haven't learned the lesson yet, but it's still, we can do, and we can still learn the lesson. So everything has a good purpose, and we look back and we think, oh, I did so many things in life, it was this or that, but they may have been part of the different stepping stones to get us to the side where, okay, now I'm ready to leave everything behind. And everyone's got their own individual journey, and according to your desire, Krishna will reciprocate and make those arrangements. Brahmanda Konya Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Beej. It's mentioned that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that the living entity is wandering throughout the universe in so many different species of life. And finally, they get a human form of life and they inquire after the absolute truth. And then Krishna in their heart directs them to a spiritual master or a source of knowledge which will help them to connect with him. So wherever we are, we appear to be lost. Sometimes we're compassionate for all the fallen, or for all the souls, the living entities in the material world. It's just like sometimes I see some wild animals and you think, who really cares for that living entity or that tree there? Who cares about it? You know, nobody's caring about that living entity there. And you can get a bit depressed, but then you think, well, Krishna cares, he's with all of them. And although we think that living entity may have a lot of lifetimes to go through before he gets a chance to get out in the material world, then we've been there too, and we're going out. And everybody's eternal servant of Krishna, so at some point they'll all go back. And in comparison to eternity, then many lifetimes in the material world is almost a blinking of an eye. Because it seems like a long time while we're here, just like when you're suffering, time passes very slow, but when you're enjoying it passes quick. So time's passing slow now for some of the devotees because they're suffering from separation from prasadam, so we'll just stop there. Iskon Guru Vrinda ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Maharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande, Guru Bhakti Vrinda ki.